Hi, welcome to Love Brave Video 2. Matt, this Love Brave video is called Love My Body. Whoa.
It is, and I think one of the first things we need to dispel is that when we talk about our bodies, when we talk about that which God has created, I don't think it's fair that we say only women have concerns about their bodies. Certainly, if we were to be honest with ourselves, I think every guy would be able to step up and say, "Hey, there's something I struggle with." If I go to the gym, if I don't go to the gym, when I see other people, I see things that I would like, man, I certainly would love to have some more hair, those kind of things. And how do we perceive ourselves, and then how do we recognize how God sees us, and what are those things along the way as we talk about our bodies and who we are, who God made us to be. I believe it's something that men need to probably talk about more, because we're not talking about it at all right now. And I think it's part of the conversation when we think about the discussion of Love Brave.
Yeah, I think that's really, really a good insight. I also think it's not age related. We think that, teenage girls, like you said, like so often we really, really attribute it to girls and women struggle with this. I talk to people all the time that are like, my bodies are falling apart as I get older. Or, when you get cancer and you're like, what the heck, body? You didn't fight for me. There's a lot wrapped up in this that we're not just talking about even how we look. We're talking about a lot of stuff that goes into these vessels that
Exactly.
our souls walk around in. I had written for some of the subtitles that I really wanted to talk about too, some big issues, eating disorders. And by that, we're going to talk about the spectrum. I don't think we should just talk about, the big words like anorexia and bulimia, but we're also going to talk about overeating. We're going to talk about disorganized eating is like something that I think a lot of us tend toward, just stuff like that, and why psychologically we do those things. Addictions, the way those affect our body, lots of different addictions, and self-harm in various forms, as well as I think like unawareness of self, like that we're just inhabiting these bodies, whatever. I think we're doing more harm in that than we think. So
Absolutely.
All right. So first question, what's the issue, Matt? What's the issue?
Well, I think one of the main issues that both men and women struggle with is seeing ourselves as God sees us. So when I look in the mirror, I see faults and I see flaws. I look probably closer at myself than anybody else besides my wife is ever going to look at me. And so what do I see? And then can I kind of hit a pause on that? Can I break down my imperfect view to give it over to God and say, hey, I am who you made me to be, and then what can I do about that? So when I think about eating disorders, even the broad spectrum, so it's not just like you were saying that the major things, but do I eat with insignificance? So the Ron Swanson attitude of saying, when you go to a buffet, it's about quantity, not about quality. So it's about filling my plate, and I'm just going to eat and consume as much as I possibly can because I paid $9 and I want to get my $9 worth. When you think about, okay, well, I've got an opportunity to go to a party, and the food is a buffet and everything's laid out and the drinks are free, and so since the drinks are free, I'm gonna just keep drinking and so it's a lack of attention that can sometimes be harmful. Same way with addictions and self-harm. It's not just doing something specific to harm your body, but it could be an indifference to doing something that would be helpful to your body. So it's both an action but also an inaction, which we can fall into.
Yeah, I think about the fact that God looks on us, and not just that he sees us as his child, but the way, the emotions, the compassion he has when he looks on us too, and what he sees. So not only does he see just this, awesome, beautiful, strong person that we have such a hard time believing in, he also, I think, he sees our pain, the trauma that goes along with like any kind of eating disorder, any kind of addiction, any kind of self-harm. But then even for just, developmental trauma that we've all experienced, we have some stuff going on inside there. We call it little t trauma. But like those aren't insignificant to God. And he says, I see you, and he has compassion on us. He sees the whole person, the darkness alongside the light, that he brings in there. And I just think that is so healing. And if we looked on each other like that, what a difference it would make. If we looked on each other like you said, like your wife looks on you, like even in her imperfectness, like she looks on you and says, wow, look at this man I married. And what if we looked at everyone around us? Wow, that person's awesome. Well, don't overthink that. But
I won't. I was listening to a sermon the other day. Justin Krupski is a pastor at Trinity Lutheran Church in Utica, Michigan. He's the senior pastor there. And the message that he was preaching on actually is on Song of Songs, which I'm also going to be doing a sermon series on this fall based on your book, Altogether Beautiful.
I'm
an
amazing
fan. Book. I'm a fan of the book. I know that a lot of folks are. Now, the issue that he stays and that he lays before is to say, when you get married, when you've got a spouse, your spouse becomes your standard for beauty. Everything about your spouse becomes the number one thing, the favorite thing that you desire in a man or in a woman. And so the problem that we have, the issue that we have, is that sometimes when we struggle personally with eating disorders, addictions, or self-harm, it's because we get into the comparison mindset of looking at other people and saying, well, I'm not like them. Mm-hmm. I'm not gifted with a good metabolism. I'm not gifted with height. I'm not gifted with blank. And we compare these things we don't have instead of thanking God for what we do have. And so when you will fall into this comparison mindset, it's harmful, because God didn't make us to be those other people. He made us to be us. He made us to be me. And so when I look in the mirror, when you look in the mirror, when anyone looks in the mirror, how do we share God's eyes instead of maybe looking through our own?
Yeah. It's one thing I feel really passionate about is just rewriting that on our brains. It's so hard, like, to take that concept of I'm good, I'm okay. God created me just the way he wanted me. And there's some sin that wreaks some havoc with our bodies, whether that's through disease or through, personal ways we harm ourselves, or, just getting older and it disintegrating. I think that we all need to just rewrite on our brains. Like, there's the lies of the devil. There's our internal lies. There's that comparison. There's so many facets to it. I feel like we could have like a chart, of all the stuff fed into our brains.
You could.
One thing I have for people too is, and this video is not about Altogether Beautiful, but I do have like stickers that say Altogether Beautiful, and people put them on mirrors, or they give them to a friend, because whatever small way we can remind ourselves to like be mindful, hey, this is what God says. I may not believe it this moment, but guess what? That's what God says. And that's what my spouse says. That's what my friend says. So often, and one thing I remember writing in the beginning of Altogether Beautiful was my husband was disgusted with me one day because he was like, I'm done telling you you're beautiful if you're not going to ever believe me. And that was a hard moment for me, but I think about our friends, our parents, anyone in our life, the people we actually value. Are we believing them, or are we believing the world? And
right.
And the other lies around us that we don't value them at all. Why would we even listen? I think that's hard.
And that was one of my favorite parts, I think, and it's right in the intro, because you talk about the serious conversation that you and Dave had, and what does that look like as we struggle with self-identity? Can we also be encouraged by the identity of the other people that God put in our lives? And I think it's legit. I think when I tell my wife she's beautiful, and when Dave tells you you're beautiful, and when we have these things, like, how do we receive a compliment? It's really tough because we've been built up in such a way of saying, oh no, you're not beautiful. Oh no, you've got that. No, like, let's let go of some of that old baggage, and let's embrace each other, especially with the words that we say and the actions that we make when we follow through.
Yeah, that's so true. And, I think that we have a lot of misconceptions about these different ways that we hurt our bodies, or like maybe simply don't appreciate our bodies, including the fact that there's generally something else going on. Like when we're dealing with body image issues, there's something underneath those waters. And it's really uncomfortable usually. So either we don't deal with it, or, we don't talk about it. Like you said, why aren't men talking about the fact that, like, body image is a thing for men too? There's something else under the waters. And I don't think we have time to answer what those are today, but I do think we need to be aware, especially when we converse with
we can't answer them all. Can't answer them all. But again, like, part of the reason we're doing these videos is to get the conversation started, so that maybe when I'm out with a couple of friends, not with a big group of guys, but just saying, hey man, like, what are you really struggling with? And if it's a body thing, how am I going to bring up with friends, hey man, I'm struggling with identity. I'm struggling with who I see in the mirror. I'm struggling with who I am as a person. And a lot of it can be internal, but some of it can be external too. And it's better when we step forward in action. It's better when we step forward and we're actually brave about the conversations that we have. I mean, it requires courage. It requires us to be brave,
right?
And to go to a place that, honestly, man, I can't remember the last time I had a conversation about my body with another guy and what I struggle with, besides, like, hey man, can you spot me? Which, that's not
intimate conversation.
Right? Yeah, man, I got you. Yeah,
gotcha. Which I like. Hey, you could always start. I like how you start both conversations with, "Hey, man." You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. It's good. It's good for the conversation. But I think that brings us to, like, how does God love brave? And like you just said, like, we're gonna be brave both as the receiver, of the conversation. Like, we're going to be brave to enter that vulnerable space and honor someone's vulnerability. We're also going to be brave as the enactor, like the person bringing stuff up. And whether that's about us, like, hey, I'm struggling, or hey, I noticed that maybe you're having a hard time, or hey, I am tired of conversations about the weather. How about we talk about something different? You know what I mean? Like, there's many ways to have a conversation. So, but that's what God does. Like, I love that God doesn't just act as a giver. He's constantly giving. And, as we study 1 Corinthians in particular, that famous love chapter, like, it's all about him and the love he gives. But guess what? He allows us to give to him. He doesn't need it, but he is like, yes, I'm going to enter that vulnerable space with you and allow you to make me a recipient. That shows us that God does in fact care about the conversation.
Exactly. And I think, does God love brave? Does he love? Is he brave? Is he willing to do the things? Is he willing to say the things that perhaps will make us uncomfortable? Absolutely. I mean, the first thing that he says to us is that we cannot live without him. And then the second thing that he says to us is that I will give you life. That the two words of God's, they're going to be words that are tough to hear when we look at a self-sustaining society, and every message that I receive and everything that I do kind of conforms or reflects society, except when I hear the word of God and when it works in me and through me for Him and His purposes. I think that's the problem that we're going to struggle with is seeing, okay, God does love Brave. God does care. He is so filled with love, and he is so brave that He did things that we could never do, and He acts in a way that we could never act, and then He invites us to see His work.
It's pretty amazing when I think about it, the fact that God was brave enough to create us as people in physical bodies, knowing it was going to be broken, knowing that we would struggle, knowing that it would be a hard road to walk and watch. There's a brave piece to that. And then brave to take on that body. Like, that's a whole other level. Like, in any other religion is besides Jesus followers, and this is me getting really real here, and if we have listeners who aren't Jesus followers yet, I just want to be real for a minute, because this is the stuff I think about at 3 a.m. is there any other God that takes on this form, that chooses to be with us and brave enough to come to the earth and not sit in His clouds, or not like be a person becoming a God? You know what I mean? There's just so much interaction from Jesus Christ that I feel like that adds a layer of trust that I couldn't personally have with another God, because he's lived in an earthly body. He gave that earthly body for me, and then He still continues to send His Spirit into this broken vessel. That's pretty awesome to me.
Well, and even as we consider Jesus, the impossibility that God could be man, something that we can only receive by faith. When you think about the resurrection and when He appeared living to His disciples before He ascended into heaven and promised to return, He showed His disciples who He was by showing them the scars on His body. And He loves, right? Jesus loves those scars, both the physical scars in His hands and in His feet and in His side. But he also in the crucifixion bore the weight of all of our physical and emotional and mental and spiritual scars. When He died, when He received the sin of the world on Himself, He took on every insecure feeling we've ever had, because those insecure feelings are the result of sinfulness, of our fall as humanity. And those are things that are going to be removed from us in the final day, when the dead rise and meet Jesus face to face. We will not have eating disorders or addictions or self-harm, but these are things that our Savior deeply and intimately knows about, because He took on everything. It wasn't just the flesh, it was also the sin of the world. And so he stands before you and me to proclaim, I am here and I am alive, and because I live, you will live. And that's the kind of thing that when you say, what other world religion is like this? There is no one. There is no one like our God, right? No one like Jesus.
I know. It gives me all the excitement. You said two things in that I think are really worth, just the fact that Jesus doesn't just take on sin, He takes on baggage. He takes on pre-sin. He takes on, the stuff surrounding sin that's vagueness of yuck, and I haven't really thought about God. He experienced that, took it on for us, so of course He intimately knows. And then the power of resurrection. I think that's really important. And so I want to that's one way we know God loves brave, and it's also how we go out and love brave. Especially for anyone struggling with eating disorder, addiction, self-harm, body image, any of our stuff, there is resurrection power that God has. He doesn't always take the scars because, like you said, they mean something to Him. They're important to Him. He loves them. And that's just, wow, that's a bold, brave love that I can't even wrap my head around. But that he gives resurrection to our stuff. And for anyone that has a hard time believing that today, or is sharing this with someone who has a hard time believing that, like, God does resurrect, and we stand on that. You know, he walked out of a tomb, and he's going to do the same stuff, the same thing with our stuff in life. He's going to walk out of the tomb with it and take our shame.
And I think that's just such a huge thing, because when we stand here and we're on this side of forever, we're going to hang up today, and I'm going to go upstairs and struggle with the same things that I was struggling with before we got on the call. And yet I know that there'll be a time, there'll be a place where that struggle is gone, where right now, God tells us we see as in a mirror dimly, right? There's a fog over our eyes. We don't understand even the possibilities that exist in a life without sin. And God says, no, I'm going to take all that away. I'm going to give you a whole new heart. I'm going to give you a whole new attitude, whole new mindset. You're going to be able to see people and love people the way I see people and love people. And that'll be a great and glorious day.
Yeah, that's a really important part of the 1 Corinthians passage, I think, that's seen in a mirror dimly when we look at the whole thing of trying not to envy, trying to believe and rejoice in truth, trying not to be irritable. And we're going to see all that as we pass through the blog posts during the week. But, how do we go out and just love brave in that? Even though we live in this half dim life, how do we do that? And it will always be a struggle. But
I think one of the ways that you wrote in the notes, and one of the things we'll see in the blogs this week, is living in this reality, loving my body, is something that is more easily done with help and support. I mean, I really feel like we need a group. We need someone in our lives. We need somebody in our lives to speak like, yeah, man, you look good. Like you are just who God made you to be, and that is phenomenal. And certainly we're not going to go out and I don't think we're advocating going out and shouting from the rooftops, hey, I am addicted. I have an eating disorder. I am self-harm. Like, we're not.
Well, that's not connecting. That's not connecting with someone.
That's not what we're saying. What we're saying is, you find a group who struggles with the same thing. Find a person who's gone through it before, and maybe can be your Sherpa or your guide to kind of walk you through this path of harm and conflict in your life. Because if somebody's lived through the conflict, they are abundantly more helpful than somebody who never has, and who won't be able to see or to understand. And so that's the encouragement from me to anyone else who's watching, is to say, hey,
find your people.
Let's find some people. Let's get out there and be brave as we seek to love my body. Yeah,
I love it. Our guiding question for the whole study is, how and who can I love brave today? And, let's transform that a little bit for this particular video and just say, how and who can I love brave with? Just answer that. Who today are my people? One person, several people, whatever. And I just, that's a really important thing. I am convinced we will never proclaim Altogether Beautiful over ourselves without that. God created us in this life together, and I need you to proclaim it to me. You need me to proclaim it to you. Without it, we will continue to feel just so much weight of the struggle. It's good.
Exactly.
All right. Thanks for the great conversation. Everybody, throw up your comments. We want to hear from you, and we want to hear what you think about loving these bodies. What do we do? What are the struggles for men and women, and across ages and spaces and places and all that good stuff? Whew, that was a good conversation. All right.
It'll be a good one.
Awesome. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, Heidi.